Live.
Excellent. Great. Today is Friday, January 13th.
Woohoo!
This is Sunday Gavas, and we're going to get started. We have a fairly full agenda with 4 really important people who are going to talk to us. We're going to try to get out of here by 3 because the weather's supposed to be kind of bad driving home. I'm going to start with Justin Kenny. Want to come on out to the table? And we will introduce ourselves to you, and then you can introduce yourself to us. And we just invited you because we want to know who you are, what you do, and what your office does, and how it relates. We think it probably relates a lot to what we do. So, and we're all, except for Senator Clarkson, we are all new to the committee and to the area. So we just need to face ground level information, and then maybe your priorities if you have it for the session, and things maybe that you don't want us to do. Be part of a priority too. But again, I'm Senator Ruth Hardy. I'm from the Addison district. Go to Olivia.
Olivia Byron, Committee. Senator Tony Pidowski, Chittenden Central.
Rebecca White, Windsor.
Senator Bob North, Franklin 1.
Ann Watson, Washington. Hi.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor District.
Excellent.
Are you Kenny, K-E-N-N-E-Y?
K-E-N-E-Y. Yes.
Okay.
Well,
Go ahead.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you all for having me.
Oh, you're the new Sue.
I am the new Sue. I get
Oh my God. I had to see your time. That's why I was doing this.
I'm
With
the
this.
new Sue Zeller. Yes, I am.
What a, well,
Yeah.
it was fabulous. And it's lovely that you're getting to set the whole table fresh for these people.
Yeah,
So they
and
aren't
I've
gonna
worked
be
with Sue
comparing
for a
you.
while in the Chief Performance Office. So we were very, very well. We worked together for a number of years.
Excellent. Great.
Yeah, but in any case, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So Justin Kenny, Chief Performance Officer for the state. I figured I would provide, since most of us are new, we'll need a refresher, an overview of the Chief Performance Office, a little bit of the history, and then, as you mentioned, talk about some of the priorities and the things that we're working on this year, which some of them are, in my mind, pretty important. So our office is an office of 2. Myself, and then one other person, Katie Bockwald, who couldn't be here with us today, who is a performance improvement advisor in our shop. And we're attached to the Agency of Administration Central Office. So the position of the Chief Performance Officer has existed for a number of years, probably dates back to 2014, and came about as a result of Act 186 of 2014, which is what they called the Outcomes Bill. It was a landmark bill at the time that did a number of things. One of those was kind of codify results-based accountability as both like a framework and a language for us to be thinking about the performance of government and the performance of government processes and systems and programs. One main thing. It also established 2 other things that are important for my particular role. One of those is the annual outcomes report, which is a report that I work with the Government Accountability Committee on each year. It's usually released in September. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into that report, but you could think about it as a curated set of data, both local, state, and federal, that speaks to the outcomes of well-being for Vermonters. And the outcomes are statutorily defined. The indicators are governed by GAC. And GAC determines whether or not we change those indicators into something that someone else wants. So when we're speaking of indicators, it's a measure of performance, essentially.
Hold on one
Yeah.
second. Do you guys have clarifying?
I just want to know what gap is.
Sorry. Government Accountability Committee.
Thank you.
Yes.
You may get appointed to it. And if you're interested in it, I know we're looking for some new members because Jeanette and Brian were I believe, were our Senate appointees.
Sure.
So we are going to be looking for maybe 1, maybe 2 new members. So if you're interested.
And the
Right.
annual outcomes report, was that sent to is that one of the committees that our committee, or one of the reports that our committee gets? Yeah, I thought
Yes.
so. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, we will take a look at that.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Oh, no, it got sent. It's part of our report.
Yeah, in September. So
Yeah, September,
you probably
usually
have it on our
September
website.
31st is the date that we.
Do you have it, Olivia? Let me check. Yeah, we'll make sure you all have it. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
So if you happen to look through that report and see some of the outcomes that are there or the indicators that speak to whether or not we're achieving those outcomes, and you have thoughts about that, definitely reach out to me or reach out to anyone from GAC to talk about whether or not we're going to kind of change those. So we've been working with GAC over the past year or 2 years to refine some of those particular indicators to get at more equity, to get at race, gender, ethnicity, disaggregation of a lot of that data, to get more geographic spread on some of those indicators, and generally just to make them more relevant. There's a number of indicators there that really don't speak much to whether Vermonters are doing well or not. So there's a whole bunch of could add, a whole bunch that we could change, but in any case, there's a whole process around it. Just backing that up. But it is one of the reports that we're responsible for passing to the legislature.
Yeah. Okay.
The other thing that came out of Act 186 was some language in the format of the budget related to the need for performance measures tied to programs and tied to budget.
Right.
So that is part of the budget process, but for many years now, the Chief Performance Office has played a support role to the Department of Finance and Management in producing a report that actually showcases performance measures attached to programs. Usually it's a little bit delayed from when the budget actually drops because we don't get the budget data from finance and management until it's done. And then we have performance data that has to come in. So usually it comes out typically within a month, sometimes a little bit more after the budget is actually published.
Okay.
So you will definitely get that report when it comes out. And last year I testified here, I believe, on that particular report.
Okay.
Had a really good conversation about it and made a number of changes as a result of that conversation.
Gosh.
Okay.
So those are the like two main things that came out of Act 186. There's a bunch of other stuff though, but in terms of like relation to the office. So the Chief Performance Office operated for many years just kind of under that purview: results-based accountability, performance management. There's a little bit around grants and contracts and making those performance-based, but that was kind of what the Chief Performance Office did. Under Governor Scott, there was a executive order 2017 that established the program to bring together, which is acronym PIVOT. You hear the term PIVOT, that's what that means. And there's a lot of stuff that's in that executive order. I would sum it up to say that it put some onus on the Chief Performance Office to play more of a centralized support role around not only all of that results-based accountability work, but also the improvement of those performance measures. So as we call it, continuous improvement within state government. Kicked off a massive training program as part of that, kicked off a number of fairly large, but also like medium-sized projects to improve government performance as a result of that as well. And that was kind of a new paradigm from 2017 until COVID. I'll talk about COVID in a minute, where we were doing the RBA work, and then we were also doing this continuous improvement work, pulling on some of the work that happened in the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Agency of Transportation around this concept called lean, which comes from Toyota. It's a methodology for improving things, right? Solving problems. So we're merging RBA, results-based accountability, and the lean methodologies together into a cohesive framework. So the office was doing all of that work. It expanded a little. So Sue Zeller, my predecessor, was in the Chief Performance Officer role and had pulled me in to do some of that work initially, and then eventually there was a position that I worked in underneath. So, and that eventually led to this point. But so we were doing good. COVID hit, as you all know, lots of stuff changed. Everything changed. So not only did Sue retire at one point, right? Kind of deep into the COVID pandemic. But a lot of the big project work stopped or was delayed because we were in rapid response mode, firefighting, very reactionary. So a lot of that stuff that we had planned disintegrated, essentially. And then also, like all of the trainings that we were doing, we had a very robust training program, no longer able to meet in person. So then we had to make a massive transition to doing it all virtually. So there's a whole bunch of change that happened. And as a result of that, it really caused us to think about what is it that our office really does? What is our mission? Because we didn't really have one.
Mm-hmm.
We had these like established things that we have done for many, many years and started to do, but we were like, what is it that we actually want to do in addition to what we have to do? So when I took over the role, I thought it was necessary to establish a mission and to set some strategic priorities. So that's what we've been working on over the past couple of years. The mission boils down to basically our office providing knowledge, skills, expertise, services, and resources to state employees to help them do three main things. One is to get better at solving problems. Two is to better manage operations. And three is to deliver better results.
Would you send those to us?
I can, yeah, I can send you
That
that.
would be great, and why don't you include the legislature in that? To supply the legislature with some of that.
We do some work that like GAC, we have done some work before on performance notes associated with, bills and tracking bills after they've been after the work has actually been implemented, whether the results that were initially intended actually get achieved, data collection, all that stuff. We can talk about that again. I would love to do some of that work again. That's part of what GAC is really responsible for. I think that is one of the intents of GAC, is to be looking at that kind of stuff.
Go ahead.
Would you be kind enough to remind everybody what the tenets of results-based accountability are? Because sadly, we just permanently recycled some of the old materials that had been moldering in this committee for many years, correct? And so, yeah, they should be in everybody's desk, and they maybe are, but we could do it, I think you're reminding us what those tenets are.
Yeah, and we did a training for the legislature, both myself and AHS, around results-based accountability and data last year, which we could talk about doing that again.
Oh, yeah, I heard that, yeah.
Yeah, I will try to simplify it the best that I possibly can. So results-based accountability is a framework. You can think about it as a model that speaks to accountability of various systems. There's two different tiers that it works at. One is at the population level, and one is at the program level. At the population level, that's where we're talking about outcomes of well-being and indicators of performance related to entire populations of people. So first and foremost, we want to be thinking about what's happening at a population scale across all of Vermont, across Chittenden County, across any other county, right? Major geographic areas. We're looking at like whole populations of people. How are they doing? How do we know whether they're doing well or not? So that's like one element sphere. And then the second level down is that programmatic performance. That we've got programs that exist within state government. We've got legislative priorities, we've got strategies, we've got initiatives, we've got nonprofit groups that are all supporting all of that work. They're all doing stuff. The idea is that they should all be doing stuff in alignment with those outcomes that we're trying to achieve at the population level and trying to understand what the specific contribution is. Within the results-based accountability framework, there's a whole bunch of different tools and structured approaches to have conversations about that stuff. We're not getting where we want to get to. Why is that the case? What do we need to do about it? Who are the partners that have a role to play? What might we try to do? Questions about how do we actually measure that? Who are our customers? What do they care about? What do we care about? How would we know whether or not they're better off? How do we know if we're delivering service as well, right? How do we know how much service we're delivering, when, to who, all that stuff. So that's results-based accountability is really about that. And the main concept there is, especially for government, that government is accountable and needs to be beholden to the people that we serve, taxpayers of Vermont, or if we're thinking about programs, the clients that we serve, the people that we serve. Like that's really the whole concept there. When we're doing work, think about what we're getting as results in those two areas. And there's a whole bunch of lingo and jargon. But
Yes, and on that little laminated square, we have the key questions we're supposed to ask with every bill. And Becca,
Would you like me to read them? Is that what you want?
I think it would be great, because this was a big deal.
Yeah.
for a long time.
Senator Clarkson, go ahead.
Okay.
Senator White.
Committee outcome questions. 1, what are the state outcomes to which our committee contributes? 2, what indicators does our committee need to monitor to gauge progress made in Vermont? And 3, how is Vermont currently performing on these indicators, and what is the trend in indicator data? And then there's a set of just bill performance review questions that I'll hold.
Yeah, sounds
No,
good.
but all good, and ones we tend to forget to just systematically look at and that was designed to
yeah,
make us look at that for every bill.
Excellent.
In
Yeah.
house committees, they have, most of them have like a laminated thing in the committee.
Trying to look at it. So,
It's totally fine. We, why don't you carry on
Okay.
with your
Yeah.
presentation?
It's meant to be a constant reminder to think about the ends that we're trying to achieve.
Right.
When we're like mired in the means or the ways all the time. Yeah. So in any case, COVID, right?
Yeah.
We finally said, we have a mission, here's what we're gonna do. And then as part of that mission, we established a bunch of strategic priorities. So there's a whole bunch of work to be doing,
Mhm.
but there's certain things that we think we want to focus on.
Okay,
So I'll go through a couple of those really quickly. One of those main ones is we need to increase the knowledge, skill, and capability of state employees across the board.
sorry, increase the what?
Knowledge, skill, capability of state employees. State employees are what deliver value. It's not necessarily the products, it's not the technology systems that we use, it's not necessarily the money, like everything in state government runs on people. And to get the best results, we want to have the best people, the most capable people. And we want them to be using very structured means to go about their work. We want to make sure that there's no confusion in the work, that people have the skills that they need to get the job done in the best way possible. And then over time, they're changing as conditions change, as technology changes. So we're not stuck 20 years ago, 30 years ago, trying to do the same thing that we did before when we have new capabilities now. So there's a whole bunch of our work is around training, professional development, and coaching and mentoring of staff to try to bump up their skill sets. That's a core part of our work. Like, train people in this stuff and then support them as they try to implement. On top of that, we believe that, hey, we can have a bunch of trained, skilled workers, but if they're not in an environment that is conducive to them thinking innovatively or solving problems, they're not going to get very far. So a bunch of our work is also around making more effective supervisors, managers, and leaders. So there's certain concepts that we talk with folks in the middle and above about in terms of how they can create the environment that will allow their staff to actually utilize these skills that we're teaching them. So we have a whole series of courses that are coming out around what we call operational excellence, many concepts that are not taught currently in state government. Right, so there's a lot of training on how to be a supervisor in terms of HR or the contract or any of that stuff, but there's not a lot in terms of, well, how would you actually help coach an employee through a problem-solving process? Or how would you better manage this particular process and determine your results? How would you visually see where there are issues and know whether or not you need to do something? It doesn't exist. We have a lot of people in operational roles that haven't really gotten any sort of operational training in how to do the work.
Right.
And so that's a big gap. We're we need to fill that gap, create the environment for the employees to succeed. And part of that also is just the realization that we're losing a lot of people. I mean, it's hard to get people to apply for the jobs. And so once we get somebody, we want to invest in them as much as we possibly can to get the most as we possibly can on them. It's just, we have to do that. There's a seed of potential there. If we don't give it light and water and nutrients to grow, it's a waste of an investment. And rehiring is a lot of money.
yeah,
So that's a big focus of ours, right?
Yeah.
And all of this is part of the system. So then there's also aspects of trying to increase productivity.
Sorry, what?
Productivity, throughput of our processes. So we're working on the skills, concepts, the individuals who supervisors and managers, but you also want to be thinking about all that performance data that we're collecting. Are we collecting the right data about our processes? And how are we going about solving problems and iterating in that problem-solving process to deliver better results? So we can produce more. I don't want to say with less resources, because always do more with less. It's actually, let's try to do more with what we have. There's more capacity. Let's try to find it and be creative. So that's a bunch of our work. Related to that, some of the RBA work is just data literacy and the use of data to drive decision-making. We have a lot of our work is around that, helping people understand what data quality looks like. How do we actually design our surveys to get the data that we need to have the right changes in our system and understand it? How do we design our even IT systems to collect the right process level data to be able to know when there's issues? And how do we mistake-proof a lot of our systems so we're not making a ton of human errors when we really don't need to be doing that? So we have the highest score. So a bunch of work around that. And then helping people utilize to the fullest extent possible all of our existing resources and existing tools. One example of this I will share is that we are a Microsoft shop. So like,
Teams.
everyone almost is, right? There's Google out there, but like state government runs on Microsoft products. And I often say like state government runs on Microsoft Excel, spreadsheets everywhere. Like even if we got all these big IT systems, it's all spreadsheets. People are exporting spreadsheets, right? But so, well, and I would say there's about 7,000 unique active users in Microsoft Excel and state government on any given day. A lot of people use Excel. Is there any training available in how to use Excel? Are people still using Excel functions from 1994 that have been replaced multiple times? Do people still not know how to use things that came out in 1994?
I still can't print
I
on
know.
Excel.
Well, that's not a judgment, but it's just the reality.
Excel.
So we're seeing, oh my gosh, there's all this stuff within Microsoft Suite that no one gets trained on. It's just the expectation, the assumption, you know how to use this stuff when you come in. Yeah, you know how to use Outlook, you know how to use a Word document. But there's all these tools that make it a lot easier to do your job. That's the intent of these things. So we're trying to like raise the knowledge level, give people the skill set, help them figure out how to use these tools better. It's going to save us time.
Yeah.
And we've many examples of working with someone in Excel. They're like, this takes me 8 hours a month. And in some cases, we get it down to 15 minutes. Just because they're like, wow, oh my gosh, it's a tremendous amount of capacity in there to hire value. So those are the priorities for us. I mentioned in the early days of Pivot that we're working a lot on projects, like larger scale projects. And in many aspects, we've shifted away from those larger scale projects because the reality is we're a team of two.
Yeah.
Many of these large projects need project management, need IT, need change management, need resources and funding and all that stuff. And as we've gone through a lot of these projects, really, we can't support these in the way we really want to make them successful. And we don't necessarily have the capabilities at the individual level to do this right at an enterprise level in many cases. So our focus has been more on individuals and smaller teams, build that competency, that capability, and then eventually we'll start to move on more strategic priorities, larger scale projects when people know how to do some of them. A lot of our work is like coaching development one-on-one with individuals or with teams.
Right.
So are you working on anything right now that might come to us in the form of a budget request or a bill or anything that you need legislative assistance with?
At this point, I don't think anything is going to rise to that level.
Okay.
I'm not sure yet. I mean, a lot of the projects we have, let's see, we've got a couple strategic planning projects that are happening with some programs.
Yeah.
Because they want to get better at prioritizing. We have a couple projects that are related to just clarifying roles and responsibilities around who should do what.
Mhm.
We have some projects that are attempting to standardize processes,
Mhm.
where we might have a bunch of different people that are doing the same thing, but they're doing it in different ways, and we want a consistent process.
Mhm.
And then we have a couple projects that are us assisting or directly doing some automation work for them.
Mhm.
So using what we call low-code, no-code systems in Microsoft Suite. So finding ways to make it so it's not so manual, there's a bunch of stuff that's happening in the back.
What if there are skills that people need that are beyond the skill set of the two of you? Do you, for example, there are some very specialized skills in natural resources
Yes.
or agriculture or whatever. How do you assist those people who might need that type of training?
Yeah, so that depends on what the particular skill set is. We have a couple training centers. We have the Center for Achievement in Public Service out of the Department of Human Resources, which is the statewide training center.
Mhm.
And they provide a certain set of trainings for folks. The Agency of Transportation has their transportation center, and they do a lot of very specific, targeted subject matter work
Mhm.
on transportation, as well as a bunch of other stuff.
Mhm.
AHS has some training folks. Department of Public Safety also has some training folks as well. So a lot of that like context-specific stuff is gonna happen within the agency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
What we tend to do is we look statewide and we try to see where are there current gaps that no one is filling.
Yeah.
That we can fill, and if we can't fill them, but we feel like it's a big need, then we try to figure out how do we do that. Who might come in to do it.
Does anyone have any questions? So if we are working on a bill that might not, that's not directly related to you, but that we feel like your expertise might be helpful in terms of thinking about it strategically or from an outcomes-based perspective, are you willing to come in and talk about
100%.
random bill that we might be working on? Okay.
Yeah.
Senator Watson.
So just thinking about the most recent report, this came out in last September, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so, and where would be the easiest place to find that?
Is it on our website already?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
okay, great.
There's a tab on our website that just says reports.
Okay.
And any report that is officially comes to this committee, it will be on there. So
Cool.
you should be able to find it there.
Great.
But it's also probably on your website, I would
Yes.
imagine.
Yeah, which I can send the link to
All
that.
80 pages.
Okay. Yeah.
It's very long.
Is it lots of graphs?
There's a lot of graphs, a lot of data. I mean,
Did you use Excel to make your graph?
a number, actually, that particular report is done, not the version that's in the PDF, but there is a live interactive report that is in Clear Impact, which is the scorecard software that the Agency of Human Services uses.
Oh, cool.
And so they have so much data in scorecard that just makes sense because most of the performance indicators come from AHS, that we also just put the report within there. Because they can share their data with us through that mechanism.
And do you work with, I'm thinking an entity that I know pretty well is Building Bright Futures, and they collect a lot of data on early childhood.
Not directly. So we would work with Agency of Education or Department for Children and Families. I always want to say, for children.
It's run by kids.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of our work is very internally focused, and we leave it to the other agencies, departments, and programs to do it more of that like external coordination work, because they have the best relationships with those
Right.
folks.
Okay. Senator Watson.
I don't know who the right person is to ask this question of, but, just thinking about like talking about Excel, one of the things that's on my radar in terms of state and government in general is vulnerabilities, like places, like cybersecurity.
Yes, security.
So your office doesn't do anything with cybersecurity.
Agency of Digital Services.
They're
yeah.
coming up. Yes, they're next.
Okay, oh,
Yeah,
great,
so
okay.
you can ask them.
Okay, fabulous. So I'm gonna hold my questions about that
Yeah.
for them, but, great, thank you. Yes.
I think the only other thing that I would add, because it's a major part of my work right now,
Mhm.
is all of the federal reporting that's done to the US Treasury on the Coronavirus Relief Fund, which is now done, for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, as well as the State Fiscal Recovery Fund.
Mhm.
All that goes through me in my office.
Oh,
So we volunteered for that early on in the pandemic, because they needed someone with skills in Excel to do it. It was just CRF at the time. It was supposed to be a year, and it's been much more than that.
yeah, it's gonna be a couple more years in fact before it's all done.
Yeah, we're trying to give it to somebody else, but we manage all of that. So all those billions of dollars that get reported to the US Treasury on a quarterly basis flow through us, and we massage all that data to present.
That's cool, that's good to know. Okay.
Yeah, and so every quarter, we're doing that.
Uh-huh.
So now January quarter is 10, so January is basically almost all of my time is focused on federal reporting.
So you must work with our JFO.
No, that would be Deputy Secretary Farnham.
Okay.
So Doug and I work very closely on the reporting.
Uh-huh.
I'm doing it on behalf of the state, and then he would work at jail.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming in. We're gonna have to move on, but I feel like we'll probably see you again. And if there's anything that we can do to help you, please let us know.
Excellent. Yeah, if you have any questions or again, want advice or consultation on anything, feel free to reach out.
Awesome, great, thank you so much, nice to meet you. Hi. You are here in person.
I am.
Oh, okay. We thought you might be zooming in, but,
Oh, so I'm gonna, if you look right over there, you can see my office. I'll be glad to come over in person whenever you want.
awesome. That is really great.
You ready for me to?
Yeah, please have a seat. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Just before you walked in, there was a question that we're holding for you. So,
no.
yeah. But I'm Senator Ruth Hardy. I'm the new chair of GovOps, and we're really excited to have you here. We are just hearing from as many people as possible in our jurisdiction to get a baseline understanding of who you are and what you do and what your priorities may be for the session or for the year, and to introduce ourselves to you as well. So we're just kind of running through everybody. We have a great list today. So we'll introduce ourselves and then I'll turn it over to you and you can give your spiel and introduce your colleague, and then we might have some time hopefully for some questions.
Make sure you have that.
Okay, awesome. So again, I'm Ruth Hardy and
Olivia, committee assistant. Senator Tony Vojtovsky, vice chair, and I am from in Central District.
Rebecca White from Windsor.
Bob Norris, Franklin 1.
And Watson, Washington.
and this is Senator Clarkson, who I'm assuming you know.
Yes.
She's the only returning member of the committee, so.
So interestingly, I think this is our first year with government operations. In the past, ADS has been with Senate Finance. So.
Oh, well, we may have stolen you inadvertently, so
No.
we'll take you.
So for the record,
Okay.
Sean Naylor, Secretary, Agency of Digital Services. And with me today is our Principal Assistant, Jonathan Kelly. So I had submitted a PowerPoint or a presentation, but I'd rather not stick to that. And
Okay.
let
Do you
that be
want
kind
us
of
to share
background.
it on the screen, or would you prefer that we
Well,
just?
I will
look at
defer
it?
to you as to how best to move it. We can step through that so that we have a little bit of a script if you want, or.
It's up to you. We also can look at it on our devices. I'm assuming it's posted.
Yes.
Yeah, so we can just look at it if we
Okay.
want to look at it, and otherwise. we'll
Yeah,
just-
I brought my backup analog version.
Okay.
With Digital Services Agency.
Yeah.
So, welcome. Thank you for the opportunity today. I'm excited to have ADS affiliated with Senate Government Operations. I think it's an opportunity for what we do to kind of tie into how we support all government operations, to transcend all the business lines. What I've included in it on the first slide is our leadership team. And I want to use this to not only make available to you the names of who's in key roles, but also to talk through how we're structured and by extension, the services we deliver. So the Agency of Digital Services is 5.5 years old. We came into an existence on April 17th, 2017. One of the first executive orders for Governor Scott was to centralize all information technology professionals within the executive branch into a single team and elevate that team to a cabinet level agency with a secretary that is also the state CIO. That looks to be, it's around 390 information technology professionals that work in the different disciplines across the state. We also rely on many contractors to supplement where either we don't have the resources or we need additional expertise. We're organized in two kind of, I'll say, verticals, and that was what's in the kind of the organizational structure. There is what we like to affectionately call the C's. So we have a Chief Technology Officer, Mark Combs, a Chief Information Security Officer, Scott Carvey, who I think we'll want to get back to here sometime and talk to you in depth about cybersecurity.
Yes.
We have our Chief Financial Officer, Kate Slocum. We have a newly hired Chief Data Officer, Valerie Giroux. I'm excited by that because she started on Wednesday of this week. So she's learning quickly. We have an Enterprise Project Management Director and Stacy Gibson Granfield. So those are the folks that manage and the delivery of projects. Jim Lipinski, who's our Director of Shared Services. So Shared Services is the division within ADS that provides support for like desktop, email, so the ubiquitous type services that you would think of as everybody needs from a technology organization. So that group has been centralized for the most part. And then last but certainly not least is on that side is Josiah Raish. This is a newly created director exempt role that came out of the last legislative session, which is an artificial intelligence director.
Yeah.
That came out of this committee and that took GovOps effort to House. And the energy tech.
Yep. And we're excited. Josiah was part of our team, so we filled that role in, I'll say like the October timeframe. Because he was already part of our team, he's hit the ground running. The Artificial Intelligence Council has met a couple of times. They're working on delivering the required documents for year one. So we're excited by that, and we've been also fortunate in that space in that some of the appointees that have come from outside of state government are really excellent additions to that council. So we're feeling that is going to be a good addition to helping us, help guys guide through understanding artificial intelligence and its proper uses and to inform you as a body as to what needs to happen to make sure that we do it always for the good and none for the bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Senator Clarkson.
Sean, I'm Allison Clarkson. Hi.
Yes.
I don't think we've met, so it's nice to have you in here. Josiah, and I can also email Josiah this, but the law school is doing quite a bit on AI and law, and that's where we intersected also in legislature. So I encourage Josiah to reach out to some people which I can help him with on what's going on in the legal realm with this as well.
Mr. Goodley, thank you. We do have representation from the Attorney General's office, but we're always looking for, as technologists, we can always get caught up in like geeking out on the technology side of it and not thinking about the legal implications. So it's good to have multiple perspectives on that. Thank you. So the other portion of our organization structure starts with Mike Nagel. And these are folks that are embedded with cabinet level agencies and departments to support them. They have local teams and they carry the local knowledge that is unique to that agency or department. And, you know, what makes human services different than transportation. So we have Mike Nagel, who's our IT director for human services. It is, right? When we look at 40% of government, something in that ballpark for human services, everything from the number of PCs to the complexity of the systems makes it a really big challenge.
And hidden labor are our oldest IT systems. So, I mean, that makes it really the hardest job. So.
Yep. We have Kevin Vianney from the agency that represents and liaises with the agency of administration. Tracy Delphia at the Agency of Education. Actually, I think Tracy's testifying right now on one of the reports from this past year on the statewide school district data
lucky
management
her.
system. Yes, that's one that still has a little bit to kind of sort out, I think.
There's some kinks there.
Yep. Peter Taub, who supports the Agency of Commerce, Community Development, and Natural Resources. Hunter Thompson, who has the Department of Labor and Agency of Agriculture.
What a great name.
He does not have an S.
Yeah, I know. I was like, wait a minute.
Well, I don't know. He doesn't actually let us know what his middle name is.
Maybe it is start with an S.
Robin Nielsen is our IT director for the Department of Public Safety. Robin is also someone that just started with us this week. It's Monday. We're excited. Robin brings a 26-year career tied to Vermont Yankee, Entergy, those places, down there. And that, I think, will translate well for him to be able to help it, public safety, especially in the emergency management side. So there will be a shorter learning curve for him there. So we're excited about having him as part of the team. And then Tom Bonomo is our director of transportation.
Great.
So we talked about how big we were, how we're kind of organized. I'll just say briefly, there isn't really any technology services under the governor's purview that we don't have a part in managing, delivering, coordinating, overseeing, whether those are managing contractors to deliver a integrated eligibility and enrollment product, or having security professionals that when the inevitable someone clicks on the bad link, know how to spring into action and ensure that it doesn't have cascading effects around their network. So any questions on kind of that high level so far?
Questions?
Senator Watson?
And to the division of artificial intelligence, I think a lot of people hearing that might think robots, right? So, I mean, I understand that to be machine learning. How would you explain the artificial intelligence division?
That's a great question. And I think it's a definition that continues to get refined. It is a little bit, I won't say robots, but robotic process automation is a technology that allows information workers to have the system complete repetitive processes for them. A simple example of that is during the pandemic, folks that were like trying to do contact tracing had to look up information out of various of our systems, and it took a number of minutes to like find, retrieve, and Josiah actually was the one that did it, built some robotic process automation that did that for the tracer so that it was seconds that they could pull that information up. So sometimes artificial intelligence can be just like tools that are very local and enable faster work. But you're right, machine learning, those things by which we have this entity that we train, right? That's the term that likes to be used, is you train it. So you provide as many data points as possible. It takes those and starts to develop rules and then starts making determinations or decisions by those rules. So I think the real kind of crux of what we're trying to understand as a society, right, is how far do we want to go with the decisioning before there's human intervention? What can we entrust with the machine, and what can we want a human to confirm? And that's a lot of what we're working on. So it's broad. Machine learning and neural networks is kind of the backbone of it.
I have a lot of questions about this. So I feel like maybe this is something that we should talk about another time. Just because artificial intelligence, particularly like machine learning, also has embedded in it whatever biases that the humans have that are writing the code. And so, like, how are you accounting for, discrimination? Things that, of course, are that we don't intend but are implicit. Anyway, that's like
That was a
bigger
piece.
conversation.
That was a piece of our legislation.
Yeah.
Last year.
And,
So I'm gonna let.
Sorry, thank you. Okay.
and I'd love to come back, Josiah and I, and speak to that. I think getting the report that they're preparing and some of the kind of the ethical policy stuff submitted, and then let's use that as the springboard to have that conversation so we can understand what we've done today. But it is something large, and it's.
And there was an AI report that just came out, probably from your office. Is that?
I just do the 15th, so we hope they upload
Yeah,
it.
and
There's the inventory.
The inventory.
It was the inventory.
It was the inventory.
okay.
And then-
I knew I saw something in my inbox. I have not yet looked at it, but so that should also, is this also on our website? It will be there.
Wonderful, thank you.
You can dig in, and then if you have follow-up,
Yes.
we can have the deputy secretary or whoever you from your agency back.
That's
to talk
great.
about it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Glad to talk about that. We have the mission and vision, but in essence, right, we're here, we exist to, in essence, find a better way to deliver services to Vermonters. That's what the technology boils down to. And if we're not doing that, if we're getting in the way, then we're not doing something right. So that's what we're really after here. We do have, let's call them our guiding principles, but they're our goals. And they're around IT modernization. So we know the Department of Labor 50-year-old mainframes, right? That's a little bit of technical debt that the state of Vermont has been saddled with.
And it's hampering what we can do.
It does, right? It's like any debt, right? You know, it keeps you from doing what you want to do because you have an obligation because of the debt. And that is, I won't say pervasive, it's a lot less than it used to be, but we still have some critical systems that need to be modernized. So that is why it's first on the list, and it's top of mind always for us. Second is improving the Vermonter experience. Modernizing a system that inherently makes it harder for all Vermonters to use is not necessarily a step forward. It may be modern, but it doesn't necessarily make the experience better. And so trying to understand unique needs, trying to make sure that our systems are developed in a way so that everyone's experience is improved as a result. And everyone's favorite, well, I don't know, maybe not everyone's because artificial intelligence, but some, the cybersecurity and data privacy. Even though this is third on the list, it's always the first thing I get up thinking about at 4 a.m. is what is the next thing we need to do to say 1/4 step ahead of the bad folks. And it dominates what we do. It really does. There isn't a decision we make that's not balanced against how do we protect the data? How do we ensure its privacy? How do we ensure bad actors stay away? And I've got an example of something that hopefully we have time that I can get to at the end in that space. And then financial transparency. One of the really base tenets of why the agency of digital services was created was to unearth all the places we were spending technology dollars. And that is something that we have been working for. You've seen, may have seen over the years, but our budget grows, which doesn't mean we're investing more in technology. We're just finding all the little places and categorizing them appropriate so everyone has a better understanding of what does it take to operate all of these systems in the state of Vermont. Oh, look at that. So I did have a slide on the Division of Artificial Intelligence. So it was just created this year with Bill H110, Act 132. And we talked about Josiah as the AI director and the council. So we're going to, and it bullets out the things that will be coming, which is the proposed state code of ethics for AI in state government, recommendations on policies, laws, and regulations for AI use, and create an AI inventory. So the inventory, I believe, has been submitted. The others will be coming soon to inform that discussion. We're not going to get into this one this time, but there was there's a dashboard. So over the course of the last couple of the last biennium, the legislature has been a tremendous partner in finding money to fund modernization. And we're doing that through very specific line items like UI modernization, DMV core modernization. And so what we have is we recognize the need for, again, around the transparency. So we have a dashboard. If you use the link there, you will be able to track it. It is updated weekly based on the latest project status reports. And I would love to come back and talk a little bit more in depth about that and any of the specific projects that you may have interest in. There's also an operational dashboard, which we included, which talks about everything from, I'll call it scope, right? So some measures on like what's the breadth of what we're doing on an annual, daily, weekly, monthly basis, and then how well are we doing those? Again, that'll, on a new version, will be part of our annual report that's submitted after the governor's budget address. So we can come back and talk in detail about that if you'd like, as it relates to the current year.
Okay.
And please stop me if I'm going too fast.
No, you're good.
Because I want to get to the cybersecurity. We have what's called a SIM. So I'm looking at this slide that's out of cybersecurity. Following along at home. It was funded through last year's BAA. So a SIM stands for Security Information and Event Management System. This has just gone live for us. What does that mean and why do you care, right? What it is it's every system that the state of Vermont uses on some level logs activity. It logs transactions, not the details of the transaction, but that Sean Naylor interacted with the database at this date and time. It logs my connection to the network. It logs activities like that. And we'd had many different systems that pulled those logs together and tried to mine them to like give us insights, right? Because you always want to be able to know what's going on. The SIM does that at a grand scale. It's a single system by which we're now sending all of our logs to, which allow for us to have buzzwords like this, right? But the single pane of glass to be able to look at things like how many people are logging in daily, where are they logging in, what are they doing? Not what are they doing in the context of like counting keyboard strokes or whatever, but what databases are they interacting with, what applications are they using? This is gone live. This, like I said, this was a direct appropriation. We are very appreciative of that because it's already starting to pay dividends. And it's only been for a couple of weeks and not everything's in it. We're only about, I think, around 75 or 80% of the data that's aggregated. One big one that's we're missing right now is judiciary. We'd like to have their data, their kind of that log data in there so that we can have an understanding of the full, like our full environment. So if there was an attack going on somewhere and it showed up in some obscure place, we might have insight to it. That was my notes here. And because I don't want to misspeak. So this was in actually this week's weekly report out of our security division. The new SIM implemented over the last 4 months is already providing a treasure trove of data. Synchronizing all the different data sources, they were able to look at nearly 10 million attempted logins that were coming from countries where we have no employees.
Wow.
And
In what time frame was that?
trying to think that there was over 30 million in that window. So I think the 10 million was within a 1 week window and it was spanned over less than 500 accounts.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. It's mind-boggling. Jim Condos, the Secretary of State, brings the same kind of data to us about how many hits we get a day.
oh yeah, and this is not the stuff that's like we're blocking at our edge firewalls and everything. This is somebody harvested, whether it's like they went on our website and said, oh, Sean Naylor is this, they know the pattern, so Sean.Naylor@vermont.gov. All right, so then they take that and they use some sort of password generator, random password generator, and they just try and hammer it against our site to see if they can figure out what my password is.
Yeah. What will penetrate it?
Yeah, and that was something that even with all the other reporting we had was something that we didn't have that way to aggregate and then like do this cross-sectional analysis and see that. And so it gave us enough confidence that now we have done a little bit of blocking for those countries, knowing that we have no employees there. There's probably no one that's trying to do business as a state employee from countries don't matter, but that is a very concrete example of how that money invested is paying dividends for us from a cybersecurity front.
That is great to hear, because in 1 year, the BAA is less than a year old. Budget Adjustment Act, by the way.
Yes.
It's come up twice in other committees. What is
I'm
the
sorry,
BAA?
yes.
No, that's okay. So that's really great to hear that it's already reaping some results for us and that it's money well spent, hopefully.
Yeah, yes, the insights it's already bearing is worth the investment.
We just had the chief performance officer in here, so
Mhm.
now we're thinking about end results and whether that mattered. So,
This is a concrete end result that was, that investment gave us the ability to pull together all the logs, which gave us the ability to do the analysis. And now we've been able to not just identify it, but reduce that risk by blocking everything originating from that country.
Mhm.
And so that's a real positive outcome.
What if somebody from a foreign country is trying to apply for a job here though, or something? There's some legitimate reason why they might be trying to access the website.
That's a great question. So when we talk about blocking, this is not saying that you can't get to a state website or you can't get to a state resources. What it says is that there's no state employees there. So if you try to actually give a set of credentials or go against something that a state employee could log into, that's what we're.
Okay, so it's not sort of the average citizen of country X who might be interested in coming on vacation in Vermont and wants to find where's the best place to ski. They would still be able to access.
All that business can carry on as.
Okay, okay, awesome. Senator Bielski.
So I guess my question now comes, given that so many times people are potentially traveling and trying to access email, perhaps they're in one of those countries and say, oh, I forgot that I need to get this number from my email. Will that prevent them from being able to do that? Or is there a way for them to navigate around that system short of using like a VPN?
So, no, there's no way around it. But we have for quite a while had a policy in place that we don't allow that, but we have a waiver exception. And so whenever someone is going to be traveling from out of country and they have a legitimate need, we have that waiver process in place, and that we can make the exceptions for that individual because we can know about that person. So we
And
have the exceptions.
does utilizing a VPN sort of skirt around this protection?
We might want to have
Yes.
this conversation.
Offline?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just say that quickly, one of the favorite things of the bad actors like to do is have a VPN set up inside this country so that they can connect from China into New York, and then it looks like they're in New York.
But that's my concern, is protecting against stuff like that.
So what we're doing is the more sophisticated ones, the ones that are probably just trying because they're either a teenager or brute force and not as sophisticated, those are the ones that we're able to market. So.
And is there, are we doing the work to be able to block the more sophisticated folks? Or
We're
do you-
always trying. That is an ongoing effort. We're constantly analyzing our stuff and trying to refine. Yeah.
Senator Watson.
My question was also about VPNs, but I'll just hold on.
Okay.
We can.
Okay, right.
I want to make sure you have a chance to finish. We are up against our time, but please finish and we will have you back. There's clearly interest in this committee.
Excellent.
We've officially stolen you. I will have to remind my colleagues. So why don't you, if you have more,
Yeah,
you
I
want to
just have
okay. Go
one
ahead.
little piece, and that is, you may or may not be aware, there's been a lot of discussion nationally around the ban of TikTok at certain states and at the federal government. I wanted to, in here is our current cybersecurity standard, the text from it and a link to where you can find it. TikTok is not a part of that, but we were a very early adopter of other Chinese technology like Hikvision, Huawei, and others to ban as early as 2019. So I figured as a new opportunity, this is a place for you to understand what we currently have on the books as far as our standard and policies for cybersecurity in China, since it has been somewhat topical.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we've already had a conversation about TikTok in here. Maybe a slightly different.
Okay, maybe a little.
We're gonna do these videos.
Yes, part for a TikTok video for today.
All right.
Today might be the day for an SEO TikTok.
The irony.
Taylor
would be
Swift.
great. Senator Clarkson, one last question.
No, I'm just curious, you've been interim secretary since John stepped down.
Well, I gotta cover the deputy departments.
Yes, exactly. And could you give us a timeline on the expectation of a new secretary
I
being?
think today, right?
Oh, about
Yeah.
10:30 this morning, the
Yeah.
governor
Got you.
announced. So let me give you that. And this morning, I was very fortunate to be appointed the secretary by Governor
Oh,
Scott.
great, congratulations.
And
I'm
then
sorry, I
with-
missed that. Maybe that was at the beginning.
Thank you. And with that, starting on Tuesday, there's also going to be a deputy secretary, a woman by the name of Denise Riley Hughes, that is coming from the private sector. She had been with one of our partners, Microsoft, in the past, and stepped away from there for a year or so, and is going to be joining. And then that's a tremendous addition for us, is to have her as part of our leadership team. So those are just announced this morning.
That's
Yeah, I
great.
saw that in my
Congratulations.
email, so I'm just very excited. I should have called you by your title.
Well, I need to get a new,
Yeah, you need to do that.
so.
Well, this has been a great introduction. I think we'll definitely have you back. I have some more questions about individual projects, but we don't need to get into those weeds yet. And thank you very much for coming, and I think we stole you, so we're gonna talk more with you and.
Like I said, right across the street,
Yeah,
glad to come
yeah.
over at a moment's notice.
Oh,
whenever you
you're-
need.
Send it
a paper airplane over there.
Okay.
Office at DMV.
Like a zip line?
Yes.
Like a zip line across?
So ADS has a small footprint on the 4th floor of the 120 building, and I think it is the best spot in the state.
Are you the one with all the Christmas lights?
No, that's like, I'm not quite as festive. I look straight down the crosswalk and I look and I can just, it's mesmerizing with the trees up and everything else. It's such a beautiful spot to have
It's
an
actually
office.
quite beautiful in its starkness too, right now.
Yeah.
I think every morning as I walk up the walk, it's so beautiful.
So I'd be glad to come back, and thank you very much for the
Well, thank
opportunity
you.
today.
Yeah, it was
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.
Great to have
Thank
you.
you for coming too. And if Treasurer Peacock is out there, you can send.
We will send him in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
If you wanna watch Netflix,
Oh,
you're in
yeah,
a
we are
different
still
country.
live.
You make a fake thing, that makes it think that you're in a different country.
We warmed them up, you're all excited.
Things that should be available to you.
When
in
my
your
uncle lived in
country.
China, that's how he used to have to access Facebook.
Yeah, like you can go on Netflix
Because
and
his
compare Netflix. just-
Hello.
Hey.
You said that's not right.
Hi.
Ash,
And Ashlyn as well. Oh my gosh.
Wait a second.
There's too many.
Oh, thanks for
Sorry,
my.
we are limiting the number of people in.
That's right.
So we're
I can
gonna have
leave.
to- You can leave, then, yeah. So one of you, if you don't mind stepping out, you can.
well, how do you
Thank
step?
you.
That's for an attorney that sits on this chair.
Only in-
An attorney.
We count butts in the chair as.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah. Are you gonna stay here?
I'll bring her.
Okay.
Where did the second
Body.
There's a chair
chair right here.
there and a chair there and then a chair there.
And there's a top of a filing cabinet you can
So
see.
you
The
have
treasurer
to
is
sit
here.
here.
Sit on that
The
chair.
opportunity to meet Mike.
It's a lie.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, your campaign.
Nice. Are you in Franklin County? Is that right? Yeah, nice. So congratulations to you.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you. Well, thank you guys for coming today. It's nice to see you. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
It was fun to watch you get sworn in last week.
Actually, by the time we got to you, we were all so tired
Yeah,
of
oh my
standing
gosh.
out.
we were
All
all
right,
awake.
I was the first one of this, of the, statewide, so.
I know, but we all been standing for quite a while.
And you're still tired.
Yeah.
So what, we're just going through a lot of people, having people in to tell us who they are, what they do, what their priorities are, and for all of us to meet you and for you to meet us, since we're mostly new here as well. So we're gonna just introduce ourselves and then I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent.
You can go through your spiel and then hopefully we'll leave a little time for questions.
Excellent. That sounds good.
Okay, so I'm, as you know, Senator Ruth Hardy from the Addison District.
I'm Olivia, the committee assistant.
Olivia. Nice to meet you.
Senator Kennedy Lipsky from Chittenden Central.
Rebecca White from Windsor.
Bob Norris, Franklin One.
And Watson, Washington.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor District. And it's so nice to see that you brought your secret weapon.
What does that mean?
Ashland, oh man, you're lucky.
So Mike Dijak, just elected treasurer this November, sworn in last week, as I think everyone
Yoo-hoo.
knows. And of course, Ashland, who is our director of financial literacy, policy, and special projects. So as it relates to legislative session policy, obviously important part of Ashland's job in terms of being our point person here in the legislature for any testimony requests or issues that anyone might have or information that people need. Ashland is a good person to go through, and she can get the right person within the treasurer's office or find the information to get back to you quickly and efficiently. So I'm very fortunate to have her as part of our team. And then Gavin Boyles over my shoulder is our deputy treasurer. Gavin and I worked together at the Department of Financial Regulation for the last 5 years. Gavin was our general counsel at the department, so we've worked closely together on a whole host of issues, pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, after the pandemic. So we're well battle worn together. So it's good to have Gavin in that deputy position as well. So we do have a presentation that we provided that sort of provides an overview of the different functions of the treasurer's office. Happy to, be stopped with any questions that you might have along the way. But you can see here from the overview, just a summary of the treasurer's office, a bit about retirement services. It's a really important, critical role for our department, treasury operations and debt management, unclaimed property, and then just a couple of bullet points about some other treasury initiatives that we have underway, and a couple of them that we'd like to spend some more energy and focus on. So about the treasurer's office, specifically 36 staff or so at the treasurer's office. And by statute, these are the responsibilities that we have: invest state funds, issue state bonds that are authorized by the General Assembly, serving as the central bank for the state. So.
Sorry, it's loud in the hallway. Are you telling me to be quiet?
You look more intimidating than
My favorite job.
Apologies. Carry
Oh,
on.
it's all good. Issuing the bonds that have been authorized by the state, serving as the central bank for state agencies. So if a particular particular agency has a big payment coming up, the state treasurer's office would sort of act as the liquidity agent there, if you will, and making sure that those kind of debts can be paid, and that's done efficiently without having any defaults or invoices that are old or unpaid. Management of the state's cash balances. So that's always been important, but particularly now as there's a lot of federal money in the state's possession. So I think the report as of this morning had over $2 billion cash on hand for the state in terms of our balances. It's well above the number. When I looked at it 5 or 6 years ago for a separate analysis, we were in the hundreds of millions of dollar range, sometimes as low as tens of millions of dollars. So much more liquid at the moment, given all the federal money that has come in, but not yet been spent, even though it may have been authorized and appropriated and has a specific purpose. It's just those projects haven't necessarily gone to completion yet. So we have quite a bit of cash on hand. Reconciling or processing of state checks, reconciling payroll, vendor checks as well, safeguarding the return of unclaimed and abandoned property, which we'll get into in a little bit more. And then administration of the state teachers and municipal employee defined benefit plans, the deferred compensation plans that are offered to certain exempt employees, and then the defined contribution plans for state employees and participating municipalities as well.
We got a great overview yesterday from our AFO with an update on pensions.
Oh, nice.
So it was nice to hear. I'm sure we'll have you back in more on that later.
Sounds good.
We're gonna hold questions so we can make sure that the treasurer gets through his report.
Okay, well, I'll go over it. You just get a sense here, a snapshot of the retirement system, how many active members there are, how many inactive deferred members there are. So individuals that might have a vested interest in the systems, but are not currently actively working for the state or for the municipalities or teachers. And then the retirees and the beneficiaries that are being paid out as well. So there are the numbers in terms of actives and those collecting. And then you can see there the total monthly benefits in each of those categories as well. So not, not an insignificant number in terms of dollars going out. And then here you can see the defined contribution plans. So these are the plans that are offered to exempt employees, commissioners, secretaries, certain other positions. There's a much smaller number, 547 individuals in those DC plans. And then at the municipal level, some municipalities participate in a DC plan as well. So 431 individuals in those DC plans. And then at the bottom there, those are supplemental plans. So the deferred comp plan for state and municipal individuals, this is an amount of money that people can put in above and beyond their pensions. It's not something that is obligation of the state. It's not showing up on our balance sheet. It's their investment into their 401k-like plan. And same thing for teachers, the 503B and some municipal individuals. So again, a 401k-like investment vehicle, but you can see thousands, over 10,000 people invested in those, and pretty significant assets as well. So just an overview snapshot of the system. The Retirement Services Division, which we'll get into the next page, but they are hearing from individuals regularly with questions about their benefits. Things may have changed, or they may not have gotten them, or they may have a change in life circumstance. Individuals nearing retirement that are very interested in what will my retirement picture look like from the state. So they do really a consumer-focused job in terms of making sure teachers, state employees, and municipal individuals have all the information they need to make good decisions, and that if there's ever an issue around payment, that those get resolved quickly, so that they have the money that they're owed.
Your phone's been ringing off.
So as we mentioned here, maintaining the retirement benefits that the legislature has established, and funding for each of those plans comes principally from three sources: the employee contributions, the employer contribution, and then the investment returns. And the investment returns largely done by VPIC, the Vermont Pension Investment Committee. That's now a commission, I should say. It's not a committee any longer. The treasurer is a member of that commission. But that commission is now an independent organization that makes investment decisions on behalf of those three systems. VSERS, VMERS, they each have a board of trustees. The treasurer serves on each of those boards, focused on any fund-related issues that might come up. For example, we just had a VSERS were board meeting yesterday. Yeah, and there are a few items to update them on. Oh, teachers, that was VSERS. So there's some questions around, some of the, just some administration items, and we have those regularly with the boards to make sure they're in the loop on issues, but also sometimes there are issues for them to deal with. Previously, some of the things like assumed rate of return would go through those boards, but now that authority is with VPIC solely. So there are some structural changes that have happened that are still being sorted out. So the Treasurer's Office uses independent actuaries to complete annual valuations comparing the actual experience of these various plans to their projected performance. We want to make sure that the assumed rate of return, the experience, inflation assumptions, all of those important assumptions are on track so that the unfunded liability does not grow, particularly if we're not aware that it's growing because our assumptions are way off relative to what reality is.
We'll take questions when, we just want to make sure that he gets through everything, unless it's clarifying right now. Okay, thanks.
So Act 114 made significant changes to VSERS and VSTERS in an effort to address unfunded liabilities, particularly on what's called the OPEB, other post-employment benefits. Created a pre-funding mechanism for health care benefits, resulted in actuarial savings of $1.5 billion off of the state's long-term liabilities. The act also put money toward those two systems as well, $75 million to VSTERS, $125 to VSTERS, and then a little bit to the VSTERS OPEB as well. So credit rating agency, we just were talking about, credit rating agencies, and we'll talk about the debt the next page, but they did view that the reduction of unfunded liability favorably. S&P, which is one of the three major agencies, moved Vermont's rating from negative to stable, accounting for the agreement, but also looking at our demographics and having some improvement there recently as well during and post-COVID. So the debt management and operations, the treasury operations responsible for banking and cash management of the state. So a pretty significant number in terms of our cash that comes through the office and comes through the state of Vermont, over $7 billion annually. We service the state's banking services network, as we mentioned, disbursement of payments and debt service, collection of certain receipts, reporting of transactions, reconciliations of all of those funds, various special funds as well, like those that we had at DFR, preparing financial statements, financial schedules for the state, disclosures for annual audits of state cash investment in the pension system. So a lot of accounting and reconciliation work that will put everybody to sleep quickly if we talk about too much more. So other, responsibilities in this regard, particularly in debt management, issuing the state bonds, as we mentioned, paying principal and interest on those state bonds as they become due, always monitoring for opportunities to refinance state bonds so we can get lower borrowing costs, managing our bond rating, as we mentioned, working with the credit rating agencies on an annual basis, have ongoing relationships with those agencies. The Treasurer's Office is the point person on maintaining those, contracting for all debt-related vendors, investment bankers, lawyers, financial advisors, economists, custodians, paying agents, and the like, and then making sure that we're compliant with state and federal law as well on the bond issuance side. So then there's an organization called CDAC, the Capital Debt Affordability Advisory Committee. This is something that has existed since 1989 in Vermont. The treasurer is the chair of that committee. Every biennium, there is a recommendation delivered by that committee to the governor and to the legislature saying how much more debt the state can issue and afford to pay. And CDAC has, since 1989, provided a recommendation, but it has been followed by the governor and the legislature ever since. So unbroken record. $108 million is the recommendation from CDAC this year for the biennium. So $54 million in each year of new bonding that could occur given our position relative to other states and our own ability to afford to make payments on debt. Unclaimed property. This is an interesting division and always, it's exciting to talk about, but reunites the owners of various assets to their unclaimed funds. So some common forms of unclaimed property, savings accounts or checking accounts that have been lost, stocks or uncashed dividends, payroll checks, and the like, refunds from, anything from utility security deposits to rental deposits that haven't been paid, CDs that have been lost, insurance payments that never went through, life insurance that never went through. So quite a significant number of things that there could be, and quite a bit of money comes into our office and out to Vermonters every year. We ensure that banks, corporations, businesses in Vermont are looking through their records to find unclaimed property and returning it to the state. We have an audit process to make sure that that is happening across the board. We have a big role in making sure the public is aware of these funds, that they go into our website, check their name, and claim the funds as well. So you can see the numbers here for fiscal year 22, $7.1 million returned to individuals, not necessarily all Vermonters, but to individuals that had unclaimed property with Vermont. So the average claim is about $410. So some are very small, but others are quite significant. So always encourage everyone to check that out, whether yourself or for your constituents. And you can see in terms of how busy that division is, the number of claims paid, 17,289. So whether those are for millions of dollars or a single dollar, that processing that and ensuring that the individual that's requesting the money is in fact the true and rightful owner, and not just obviously sending money out to whomever fills out the form. So there's some diligence that goes on with each of those 17,000 plus claims. And then just two other initiatives we wanted to highlight: the Local Investment Advisory Committee, LIAC. This was something that was created by the legislature in 2014. It's chaired by the treasurer. And it's tasked with increasing economic development and job growth in Vermont by committing up to 10% of the state's average available cash balance to local investments here in Vermont. So we mentioned the cash balance for the state is pretty significant now, but a lot of that is monies that are dedicated for spending in the next couple of years. But nonetheless, that 10% number historically has been around $40 million, and $40 million have been devoted for things like infrastructure improvements, higher education, rehabilitation of state offices, housing. But I think there's an opportunity there. Some of that money has been paid back, and there's the ability to redeploy. And also, there's probably much more capacity there in terms of the 40 million that was done in terms of the analysis of the 10%. And where our cash reserves are at this point. So we would like to really reinvigorate that group. The interest rates are pretty favorable now for this money. This money does not have a market interest rate. It can be done below market. It can be done, with a whole host of different approaches. But its main goal is local investment, economic activity, and job growth and job creation. So we're excited to explore this, and I think housing will be our top priority in terms of ways that we can devote more money to housing and affordable housing. And then the Vermont ABLE, Achieving a Better Life Experience. So this was a 529-like plan that was established here in Vermont. It was allowed by the federal government, and then states had to implement it locally. And Vermont was an early adopter of the ABLE program. It allows individuals with disabilities to set up one of these accounts, or individuals that their parents or guardians, and then they can put a significant amount of money into these accounts and not have it impact their federal or state benefits. So the amount that they used to be able to hold prior to ABLE was about $2,000 in assets before their benefits were impacted. Now you can have up to $100,000 without having your benefits impacted, and you can have up to $400,000 actually in an ABLE account. On the back end of that, there's some impact on benefits, but you can have up to $100,000 now and not have that diminish what you're getting in state and federal benefits. So really important program for individuals and for families. Individuals can contribute to it like a 529. Those whose account it is can also have wages go into these programs as well. So we really want to continue to highlight and promote the ABLE program, because it really has benefited a number of individuals and families. 849 active accounts, over 7 million or so in accounts, cash under management. And the average account size is about 8,800. So above that $2,000 threshold, almost $7,000 above what individuals would be able to hold on to prior to implementation of ABLE.
So are you?
I believe so. I think that's our overall summary.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. Well, thank you. That's really helpful. Senator Biehalski had a question. Senator Lawson.
I have two questions as I sat through the rest of it, and another question popped up for me. One of them is around the pension and the BPIC, and and I know you're brand new into the role, so you may not have the answer to this, but I'm wondering if there is any exploration within that committee about what kinds of investments we are making, or conversation about divesting from fossil fuels.
Have that conversation every year.
So that the question, I'll just say my own perspective, and I think a lot of this has been already incorporated, and people are thinking about this in BPIC. But when I was at the Department of Financial Regulation, we thought a lot about climate change and the risks that presented from a financial perspective in a couple of different ways. One, if you're an insurance company in Vermont and the climate has significantly changed, and you're protecting people's homes and people's cars and other pieces of personal property from weather events, how is that going to impact your insurance company when maybe we have less snow and less ice, or we have more severe hailstorms, more severe windstorms, more flooding, more agricultural flooding in the spring. So we wanted our insurance companies to be thinking about that. And we also wanted them to be thinking about the financial risk of long-term investments in things that, in industries that have high carbon footprints like fossil fuel, because clearly the economy is transitioning to a lower carbon future, and you don't want to be left with stranded assets, if you are not transitioning your portfolio along with that. So I mentioned that as a backdrop to what BPIC, has currently done. They do have ESG, guidelines when they make their investments, environmental, social governance practices. So that could relate to the environment, could relate to other societal issues, and they do have opportunities to vote on their proxy for certain, initiatives, or to request a proxy vote on certain corporate governance issues or societal issues. And then separate from that, there's also a decarbonization policy at BPIC that works with corporations to decarbonize their business and their industry. There's really 5 principles that are laid out. The last and final would be to sell the investment if it was clear that it was presenting a financial risk and it was not going to successfully survive the transition to lower carbon economy. I know that BPIC views that as a last resort, the current BPIC construct, because there are challenges around having a blanket, I can't say the word right now.
Blanket?
Yeah, it doesn't even sound right to me now. You're saying. Having a total prohibition on certain industries can present operational implementation issues that, I'm still personally getting up to speed on, but this has been a conversation in BPIC over the years, and they have made progress in recognizing the financial risk presented by climate change.
However, their policy still recommends against it. And we have a divestment bill.
Amazing. My other question was around the unclaimed property, and is there an in-person option for people to claim that property? I'm just thinking about the lack of technological access and access to a notary to do that form. I recently found out I have unclaimed property. I need to get notarized form to your office for.
Yeah, well, it's a balance because there is an in-person option.
Okay.
They can come right up to the 4th floor of the treasurer's office, off the elevator, go to the
So I
left.
can come
and
visit
there's-
you?
Yeah, exactly right. Come to the right to visit us, go to the left on claim property.
All
But
right.
there's a consumer services desk, I think that's sort of all set up to claim. There's a balance between, in terms of fraud prevention as well. I mean, sometimes you want individuals to come in person to verify who they are. So there's a little bit of a dynamic there in terms of, you want it to be easy on the technological side, but you also want to make sure we can verify it's by the rightful owner. So it's a situation where we want to make sure people can do it from a technological standpoint, but there's actually an interest in having people actually physically come into the office to collect, particularly if it's a physical asset.
Sure thing. No, and I noticed on the form that over a certain amount you require that it be notarized and returned. So I certainly do see that, but I was just thinking, for some people who maybe are closer by, it might actually be easier.
Yeah, and
to walk
anybody
in
can
and-
come in. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Senator Watson, did you have
Do we have any statute that requires a certain level of reserve fund be held, like in cash on hand?
I can't think of a statute. I can't think of a legislative requirement.
Do you have any other internal reserve fund policy guidelines, like how much you think you ought to have in terms of cash on hand?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly what that, cash division does in terms of anticipating what types of expenditures are going to come either on an annual basis, like there might be certain times where money is coming in at a certain point of the year, but certain expenses are coming in and you want to make sure you have enough cash to, ride out that volatility. There's also, you look at how much capital projects are going on as well. So if we haven't issued a new bond and we're going to spend into the cash fund, we want to have a sense of capital projects that are on the horizon as well. So I think the most important thing is you want to make sure you always have the liquidity to pay whatever is coming due, because otherwise we would have to borrow on a short-term basis and pay some interest on that.
I'm just thinking about it in terms of, the way that we talk about it, the city of Montpelier anyway, is it's either like a certain percentage of your operating budget, we want to generally have, or, 3 months or however many months worth of operating budget out, but there's not like a guideline like that you all have.
Folks in cash management might have some internal policies.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, so we do cash projections and we know when big payments hit at certain times, right? Like we know what day of the month we have retirement benefits payments going out. We know what times of the year we have to pay for Medicaid and things like that. And so we don't have a specific policy, you're right, but we have a pretty solid understanding of what we need in order to cover things. And then, you also in the legislature, it's not our cash on hand, but in your budget, in
Right.
terms of reserves, you have your statutory reserves.
Right.
That I think are fully funded right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then
One
other,
more?
yeah,
Go ahead.
you mentioned that you have this 10% that's available for investments. How do you let people know about that? And how can we let our constituents know about that as an opportunity?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're sort of, that's part of this, re-energizing of that committee that we want to do. We're having our first meeting, I believe, next week. And there, it's been in existence for a number of years. Representatives to that committee include a member from like VITA, the Efficiency Vermont, the Bond Bank, VHFA. I think I'm missing one. Oh, I think you said-
DEIC.
Yeah, BEIC. So those are the organizations, I think, not to get ahead of what the committee wants to do, but I think it'd be good to have somebody from the Commerce Department, from ACCD, regularly attending those meetings, maybe somebody from the Bankers or Credit Union Association or banks or credit unions themselves to just get a better sense of what is out there and what might be a good use of these funds. And then to think about how are we going to go through requests and how are we going to prioritize them and approve them. So I think there's some work that we all need to do to think about that. And then once that's done, we can promote.
Cool. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And just these funds, just to think about it, they are unlike a bank or a venture capital firm or whatever, obviously everyone's always worried about risk. But this fund in particular wants as little risk as possible because it's the state's money that will need to come back eventually to pay for something. And it's not a investment fund in the sense of, the legislature was aware that there was going to be a certain degree of risk that came with it. They are for local investments to municipalities, nonprofits, different entities. So one of the metrics that we would look at is the level of risk. So if it's a municipality or like to BGS, if they're doing state building efficiencies, those are pretty good risks, that eventually you're going to get paid back.
Yeah.
So it's a calculation that might be a little bit different than, so if it was a startup business, it would not be.
Right. Okay.
It's just the point I was trying to make.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
helpful.
That first one.
So first and foremost, are we able to keep any of the interest on that vast amount of ARPA money we have?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the interest, flows through to our interest in investments.
Okay, so the feds have let us keep the interest on that, because this is.
Oh, yeah, as far as I know, yeah. I mean, they're not asking for that back. I have never heard of that, yeah. I can double check. but-
Right, no,
Yeah.
That
that's,
was a question in the early days about whether we could keep the
Yeah.
interest.
and so I'm glad
The
to
federal
hear.
government probably didn't think about it, and they didn't think about the interest rate environment that we're in now, where not only do we have a lot of cash on hand, but the interest rates are going up.
And I just am curious, on unclaimed property, what percent of unclaimed property is actually claimed? You just gave us the amount that's actually claimed, but what percent of the unclaimed property is claimed?
Yeah.
And then as I recall, it goes into our coffers after a certain period of time.
Yeah, so if you think of let's call it $100 million or $120 million of unclaimed property at any given point. I think we said 7.7 was paid out.
Yes, that's what one, which is fine, but
Yeah, so let's say we pay out
the
7.1
universe
million,
is much bigger, is I guess what I'm trying to.
and let's say 10 million comes in every year. And this is just an example, but 10 million comes in and we pay out 7.1. But there's already a base of 120 million. So, it's growing every year, and the likelihood that you're going to reconnect somebody in reality goes down as time passes and people forget about.
But we have a statute of limits, where we can just absorb it into the budget, to the cost.
So we make a recommendation, right, to the legislature around how much we think in practical terms will never be claimed. The right to that property never goes away for individuals. They could claim it, but it just becomes practically very unlikely at a certain point. And particularly when there's, when that fund is growing every year and we're not able to reconnect, even the amount that's coming in, we're not able to meet that same amount going out. So the fund is growing every year.
And my last question for today is local investment, the local investment option, which many of us were really excited about passing in 14. It's 10% of available cash. We have a
Yeah, up
lot
to
of
10%, yeah.
cash right now. And at what point will can the legislature make recommendations to you, to that group of people for investment? And is the time frame for understanding what the 10% of available cash is fit into the legislative timeframe so that we could actually be making recommendations to you on how to invest?
So, the 10%, I mean, just when we think about it right now, the 200 billion of money that's in the 2 billion, what did I say, 200 million?
2 billion.
A couple more zeros here.
So 2 billion, so let's say 1.2 billion of it will eventually be spent down through federal money. So we want to make sure we account for that when we're looking at the 10%. I don't think we've done a updated 10% analysis for a little while. Now it's more complicated because it's not just looking at the average balance over a period of time because it's somewhat skewed up. So I think, so you want to do that analysis and make sure you get a reasonably conservative number. What we wouldn't want to have happen is that money is out the door, and then all of a sudden someone says, we need the $300 million, and then we have to go borrow it because we don't have it in our bank account, and then we pay interest on that borrowing. So we want to always, we want to make sure we stay very liquid, and that's why the 10% was a pretty reasonable threshold there. Yeah. But just given the fact that so much of that money is going to be spent the next, some of it has to be spent in the next 2 to 4 years.
I guess my question is simply, as we look at the cost of things to invest in, let's talk about housing. When could the legislature make recommendations to your office about an investment amount and into what kinds of projects?
So, I think the statute that certainly has like industry types that we can invest in. So that's a way that, and housing is one of them. That's the way the legislature has sort of put guardrails or guidance into the committee. But in terms of, specific investments, I think that's probably, we probably want to, something to keep separate in terms of those on the committee making that
Well, we
decision.
could send a letter again.
Yeah.
Legislative sessions. Okay.
Ashley, did you want to add anything?
No, the only thing I was going to add is that since the local investment advisory legislation has been passed, there have been a couple of bills that the legislature has passed. One in particular that comes to mind is weatherization. You authorized I think it was either $5 or $7 million of the 10% to be used for weatherization projects, but it's up to that. So that's the kind of construct that you've done in the past. Just for historical reference.
That's interesting. Last question, Sarah Bukowski.
Well, now I don't know which of my two questions I want to ask.
Oh, sorry. Sure.
Do you audit the unclaimed property to make sure that the people, if someone's no longer alive, it's unlikely they'll access their unclaimed property? Are there ever audits done to pull that out?
But their estate could access.
Yeah, their descendants could, there could be a beneficiary. So, but essentially there are audits done to make sure what we physically hold and that we have accounting for all of it and that hasn't changed. And that's more for fraud prevention and stuff internal to the office. So that is done. But then there are analyses as to the practicality of how much money will be reclaimed in the future. And when it becomes impractical, based on the analysis, we expect, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million can be given to the legislature to be incorporated in the general fund because, it's so old or it's so unlikely that someone's going to claim it, or the dollar amounts, are so small. Like we might have, tens of thousands of claims under $100. Those have been sitting there for a long time. The likelihood that all 60,000 people are going to all of a sudden say, $50 back is unlikely. So I think that's the analysis that's done, and then some of that is recommended to give to the general fund every year.
It's a good project for an intern.
All right.
Bigger
than that.
But it's,
No, it's
We
way.
are past time, so
All right.
we have the auditor waiting in the
Oh,
hallway.
wow, okay.
On Zoom.
but we will
certainly have you back specifically about pensions. I think because a lot of the area that the treasurer's office covers is the work of the finance committee. But it was great to have an overview of what you all do and
Great.
welcome you to your job.
Thank you.
And we will certainly have you back. And
Look forward to it.
yeah, thank you all for
Thank you.
coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
Good weekend.
You too.
Yeah, nice to meet you. You're Gavin.
Gavin?
Bob Norris, nice to meet you, Gavin.
Oh, nice.
Oh, chocolate. Is everybody ready for Godiva moment?
Oh, sure.
Do we leave before the talk?
No, you guys are
Vampire fun.
All right, we are gonna move on to our next guest because we're trying to focus. Thank you both.
Yeah,
All
thank you.
good to see you.
You as well. Have a good weekend.
Bye. Have fun.
To like compare like
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
left, what's here.
I'm gonna focus finish those.
Yeah, no, I've got so much at Christmas. We bought at Christmas. And my sister-in-law sent us the future.
Oh,
My sister.
Well, I was looking for the auditor, but.
Yeah, I guess he's on Zoom. Mr. Auditor, hello.
Oh,
Good
my,
afternoon.
where are you?
You're in your.
I wish I was there. That's falling water.
Oh, it is full of water. I've been there. It's gorgeous.
What is it?
It's
Well,
Frank
is
Lloyd
it-
Wright's most famous house.
Yes.
Yep.
So Frank Lloyd Wright, that's part of the house.
I made my pilgrimage a few years ago.
It's in Pennsylvania and it's gorgeous. And if you're in that front row, go see it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sorry we're running a little late. We had tried to stay on time, but we of course didn't, as you know how it goes. But we are today just wanting to get an introduction to you and to your office and your work and have you get to know us a little bit. We will certainly have you in on specific bills. Literally the only bill on our wall right now is about the auditor's office. So we'll have you in on that bill. So we don't want you to get into details about bills yet, just a sort of introduction to who you are and what you do. So I'm going to start off by introducing myself, although I know you know who I am, but I'm Senator Ruth Hardy from the Madison District.
Olivia Parker, committee assistant.
Senator Tanya Vyhovsky from Chittenden Central.
Rebecca White from Windsor.
Bob Norris, Franklin 1.
Ann Watson, Washington.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor District.
And we are.
I certainly know the chair and Allison, and to you other four, congratulations and welcome.
It's exciting. And we wish you were here, Doug, to participate in our Godiva.
I will be down for the next get together when we talk substance. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, take it away and tell us about your office and what you would like us to know.
I don't know how much your colleagues know, so I'll just give you the 25-cent tour. Many people assume that the auditor's office does financial auditing and compliance auditing, in this case, the state's financial statements and the federal single audit. And those are very important, but we don't do them in-house. We farm that out to a firm. It was KPMG for about 20 years. It's now CLA. As I say, it is important work, but to me, it's not nearly as interesting as what that leaves us to do, which is performance auditing. And I enjoy it immensely. I have a great crew. And after 10 years, I still enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to another 2. So performance auditing is probably not well known to some of you. It is exactly what it sounds like, and there are different approaches and different subjects. The first and most prosaic is that we often look at the nuts and bolts of state government, which is not something I was terribly familiar with when I came in, being a policy guy by trade. So I'm trained as a lawyer. I'm not a CPA, but I've been a policy guy for 30 years. So this was a good fit for me, and I've enjoyed it. So in addition to the nuts and bolts, we also do performance auditing of programs. I don't know why my phone keeps ringing. Forgive me.
You're popular.
Yeah.
It's Tim German calling for golf.
So programmatic performance auditing can be challenging because the data is not always available. And that's difficult for us, but we do the best we can. We try to tailor the objectives to the data in some cases, or we have to postpone or simply not do a job. We cover a lot of ground. In the last few years, we've made a concerted effort to focus on healthcare, which is very important to me and my deputy and to you and the state. And as long as I'm in office, we will devote resources to healthcare-related jobs. Economic development was of interest to me before I became the auditor for about 25 years. I came to Vermont in the late 80s to work at City Hall in Burlington for a brief time for Bernie when he was mayor, and then his successor, Peter Clavell. And that was my focus. And then I had a consultancy for almost 20 years that was largely economic development related. So we do quite a bit of work in that area. We also do a lot of other stuff. We did a really interesting job at A&R, looking at how they've spent the first $100 million tranche of money on the lake cleanup. We just did a job on the Vermont Criminal Justice Center and how they deal with their primary responsibility, which is to ensure that uniformed officers receive the training that's required by statute and rule. Again, not something that most people think about, but I think they would prefer to know that their officers are properly trained. And it's not like, can you shoot? You know, these, as you all well know, this is a different time. They have to be able to deal with mental health issues, and it was a challenging job. I enjoyed it. We have 16 people. 11 of them are auditors. We have a budget of about 3.6, 3.8. It changes each year. A third of that goes to support our staff. The auditors themselves are not all CPAs. About a half of them are. They all have graduate degrees for the most part. Very capable people. I respect them a lot. And they do work to what's referred to as GAGAS standards, generally accepted government auditing standards, which makes it possible for me when I come to you or your colleagues to another committee to present a report. I know virtually every word in that document has been checked multiple times. It's only evidence-based. That's all there is. And GAGAS, unfortunately, for me, requires enormous documentation. So a job that you would think would take 3 months takes 6. But it really is important to the integrity of the office. And it's fun, I think, anyway. We are also tasked, as Allison and Ruth know, to audit every single TIF town in Vermont 3 times during its life cycle. That was my first unfunded mandate. I enjoyed that. But once it became clear how time consuming it was, the legislature, you and your colleagues were kind enough to give us another position because it was taking so much time out of the office, and still is. We just completed a job about the Burlington waterfront TIF that took well over a year because of its complexity and the bad record keeping. We also, I think the chair knows this and is interested. We are also tasked, not directly, we farm this out, in auditing the sheriffs. And that's an interesting little corner of the world. I don't know how it came to be. The whole public safety world evolved over 100 years for sure. And of course, sheriffs are in the Constitution, but we have some issues with the sheriffs. And I will be in to talk to you about that when it suits the chair. But and on a related note, about 5 years ago, we did a job. I was curious about what the state and local governments spend on public safety. This was in the summertime, and I was just nerdy and looking over the budget, and it's not all in one place. So we put it together, and Census reports information on localities. And for FY17, it was $574 million, which I thought was a staggering number for a state with 630,000 people, especially at a time when crime was going down. So I said to Senator Sears and Representative Brad at the time, you know, if you had a blank board and could design the public safety system from scratch, would it look anything like what we have now? And they just chuckled. Now, that's a big ticket item that requires an immense focus and time and resources. And you guys, I think, unfortunately, are often charged with putting out fires, and I get it. But it seems to me that subject is worthy of attention down the road. It's just so much money. You know, we hear every governor say, I know where the efficiencies are in state government, and I'm going to get them. And then once they get elected, they typically don't find quite as many of those as they thought they would. But this has got to be an area where there's opportunity for savings, it seems to me. So we'll give you what we know, and there's some weird stuff going on right now, which we will share with you down the road. Also, as you know, I think, or some of you may know, there was an interesting bizarre and troubling decision by the Vermont Supreme Court recently involving my office and our ability to access the records of contractors who do work for the state. This is an existential threat to the work of the state auditor's office. And we have heard from a number of your colleagues of an interest to address that and cure the problem created by the court. So we'll be back to you on that as well, because I think that is in your jurisdiction.
Yes, that is the bill on our wall.
Great, glad to hear it. So that's the overview. I'm happy to take any questions. That was really short. There's much more to say, but if you're interested in the subject matter that we have addressed during my tenure, don't hesitate to call me. I'm easy to find. I've been working remotely now for a while, but the phone's right here, as you heard, fortunately. So,
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Auditor. Does anyone have any questions at this point? You are our fourth sort of agency head type person to have in, so we're flagging just a little bit, but and I know we'll definitely have you in to come to talk about sheriffs. I've been in touch with your office about that, and also the bill about contractor audits and other things that may come our way. So if you or your staff see bills that we're working on that you've done a report on, please reach out to me directly and let me know, and we can have you in to talk about that specific audit or report that you've done.
thank you.
Senator White.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Auditor, I really appreciate the newsletter that you put out online. It was extremely helpful in understanding what I think is a really clear disparity between the questions that we ask folks seeking public assistance and the questions that we ask people seeking multi-million-dollar veggie funds. So I hope that you continue that tack, because it was helpful for me to read, and I had many constituents who reached out who were disappointed with that reality, but were unaware of it without your work. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad to hear that it was of use. And yes, we will continue that. I didn't do it and start until about 1.5 years ago. And to be honest, I was disappointed in the fact that the media, which admittedly has shrunk in size, doesn't always cover our work. And when they do, it's not always as robust as I would prefer. So I came upon and actually purchased a very substantial email list several years ago for campaign purposes, and I didn't need it anymore. So I asked the Attorney General if I could give it to my office. He said, as long as you don't ever use it again for campaign purposes, why not? So we do, and I'm very happy to have it. Thank you. Two quick things. One other reason for us to come back to you the next few weeks, likely. Every year we do what's called the recommendation follow-up. And we have, most of our GAGAS audits have recommendations, and a year out from each one, we go back to the auditee and determine with evidence, not just their say-so, the extent to which they have in fact implemented our recommendations. Then we go back another 2 years out. So every December or January, I put together a memo for you guys just to bring you up to date on how we've done. And it's a performance measure for us as well, even though I have no control over the extent to which they do that. I'm hopeful that the reports themselves and the evidence is persuasive. On the other hand, the administration sometimes says we don't have the money, we'll get to that later, or whatever, but we do pretty well in terms of percentage. And finally, while I had a few minutes before you let me in, I checked, and the 4 new folks, I didn't see their bios. I wanted to learn a little something about your background, and they weren't up yet, so I look forward to that.
Yes, our bios will hopefully be up in the next couple of weeks, or the new bios, so you'll learn more about us. But Senator Clarkson, Senator Watson had a question.
Well, actually, you answered my question, so.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, thank you.
Senator Clarkson, go ahead.
No, I think of you, Doug, as being one of our great watchdogs and one of our consumer protection in a very different way than the Attorney General is. And I appreciate your work enormously. And I know you're so frustrated with most of our work in Senate Economic Development. To go to Becca's earlier point, although it's become more rigorous with the advent of ARPA, I would say ARPA has forced us to be a little bit more rigorous in some of that. But I guess what, oh heavens, I was just down that track and just lost myself in what I was going to ask you. So it'll pop and I'll come back to it.
It'll come back. I'm
So-
still getting used to there being 6 of you, by the way.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, we're
we had
getting
to
used to
change
it too.
Senate rules to add a member because so many people wanted to deal with government operations. It's very exciting. We're an awesome committee. You should come hang out with us sometime.
Well, I'll be very honest. I think your work, although in the public mind, probably pretty modest, is really important.
Oh,
Well, we haven't done anything yet, so you can tell us at the end of the session whether
He
you
says
still
that
think that.
after our track record of all these years. So my question, Doug, is, you know, you issue these terrific and challenging reports often. What is just remind me what your enforcement capabilities are when things are, I just can't remember what your enforcement options are.
That's because there are none.
So that
I can't
I thought that was
compel,
the answer.
I can't compel anyone to do anything except provide records unless you're a contractor. According to the Supreme Court, I am not an agent of the state.
I know, that's such a odd thought.
But so in answer to your question, no, the reason you don't know about it is because we've never talked about it because I don't have that authority. And it's probably just as well. God knows what I would do if I had that authority.
Okay, now that we have you on the record saying that. Careful.
But you're the ones that would first propose such a change.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm realizing that, and that's one of the reasons I asked is, yeah, okay.
Well, I mean, the
Okay,
system,
We'll put that thought into consideration.
Yeah, we'll have to think about that. Senator Biehowski.
My question mostly got answered.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think that we are pretty much done for today. And, but yes, we will have you back to talk with us soon about 2 bills that we'll be taking up in the next couple of weeks. And so we will be in touch and look forward to seeing you and any of your staff that you want to bring with you. We are keeping the room numbers down, so just heads up. So thank you for joining via Zoom today.
And
Yeah.
it is a treat to see falling water, really one of the most spectacular buildings
great
in
fun.
America.
And if you haven't been and you go, take the extra time, and it's a few more dollars to take the morning or late afternoon tour, because it's a smaller number of people. The place is not even open to the public for the morning tour. You see much of the property that is not shown to other people. And when you're done, you have a private brunch on Mrs. Kaufman's old pottery porch.
Yes, on the
Wow.
terrace.
It's fantastic. It was a 2-hour tour.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and you can
Interesting.
hire
But now
actually.
everybody knows, because so many people are watching us live on YouTube right now, and just like booking their trips right now.
And if you're doing it, the other property close by, you need to do too. And I've totally
Yes.
forgotten.
Well, anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I
Thank
know you've
you.
had a long
Have
day.
fun.
Look
Take
forward to
care.
coming back.
Have a great weekend, Doug.
Thank you. You
All
too.
right.
Bye.
So I think we're done for today. Look at that, like 2 minutes early. I'm so impressed because we were behind for a while. Yeah, he was quick and, efficient auditor style. You can take us off live and